on November 21st, 2018, at around 4 p.m. inside of a Pueblo, Colorado State Hospital. A 75-year-old man would pass away from a battle with cancer that only recently had metastasized and spread throughout his entire body. That man's name was Adolfo Champ Reynoso, a very well-known and influential Mexican Mafia member who was a member of the Boyle Heights Big Hazard 13 gang. He would leave a lasting legacy on not only the Mexican Mafia, but the entire United States prison system.
Some call it a version of hell. Johar Tsarnaev will likely call it home. New tonight, we're getting an inside look at Colorado's Supermax prison. Jurors will begin deciding next week whether Tsarnaev lives or dies.
And 5 Investigates' Karen Anderson shows us tonight where he'll likely be heading either way.
Its formal name is ADX Florence. The forbidding federal prison located in Florence, Colorado has come to be the place where the worst of the worst are sent. Conditions by any standard are harsh. Most inmates inside Supermax must spend 23 hours a day in isolation, alone in a cell only this big, measuring just 7 by 12 feet. And Johar Tsarnaev would have to share this small space with his toilet, sink, shower, and bed. In Supermax, he would join some of America's most notorious inmates. 9/11 planner Zacarias Moussaoui, Ramzi Youssef, mastermind of the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, shoe bomber Richard Reed, and Unabomber Ted Kaczynski, to name a few. A former employee tells us some inmates can read pre-approved books. Most have a black and white TV and may have court-imposed restrictions as to what they can watch. But court exhibits obtained by 5 Investigates show life is grim even with these privileges. Here's a concrete bed platform surrounded by rings that can be used as restraints. The isolation drives some inmates to madness. Jack Powers, showing his homemade tattoos, amputated 2 of his own fingers and part of his genitals. Another inmate cut off his pinky finger and ate it in pieces along with his ramen soup. Another inmate wrote, "I go 6 or 7 days without a word spoken between myself and another human. At this time, I do not want to live. Every day in the ADX is a suffocating hell." Even if he's sentenced to death, Tsarnaev is likely to spend years at Supermax until his execution. Karen Anderson, 5 Investigates.
In a high-security federal courtroom in Los Angeles, 13 men are now on trial, charged with conspiring to commit murder, narcotics trafficking, and extortion. Prosecutors say the men are part of a ruthless organization known as the Mexican Mafia, also called La M, Spanish for the letter M. It may sound like a crime syndicate from south of the border, but in fact it is a California prison gang that began 40 years ago. Today, its power and influence have spread far beyond the walls of Folsom and San Quentin. For months now, the jury in Los Angeles has been watching hours of undercover law enforcement video showing Mexican Mafia members casually plotting murder.
Okay, well, then we'll kill him then. We'll kill him. I said, if he's saying something bad about the Griga, then kill him.
La M was founded in the California prison system back in 1956 on the principle of self-defense. Hispanic inmates were forced to band together to protect themselves from other prison gangs like the Aryan Brotherhood and the Black Guerrilla family. But within a matter of years, they went from prey to predator, seizing control of prison rackets, gambling, drug distribution, protection. And today, they still control the inmate populations at most prisons in Southern California.
We could pretty much control any prison where we existed.
Much of what's known about the Mexican Mafia was first learned from this man, Mundo Mendoza, who joined La M back in the early 1970s while serving a prison sentence for murder at San Quentin. He eventually defected and has testified against dozens of his former Mexican Mafia associates. Now in hiding from La M, he agreed to talk to us in disguise.
It was the cream of the crop. We were, the best equivalent I can give you would be like the Green Berets in the military. We consider ourselves an elite group. We were tough guys.
How many people have you murdered?
Personally, about a dozen.
2 of the Mundo we'll talk about were part of a contract he carried out for La M.
Very sloppy. That first time, we tried using a bag. We put a bag over his head to try to suffocate him to death. He wouldn't die.
Then they waited around for the second victim, shooting and stabbing him numerous times. Then they watched him die.
And he was telling us, don't shoot me anymore, I'm dying. And as he said that, his voice kind of faded away, kind of like the Wicked Witch in The Wizard of Oz.
It's an interesting way of putting it.
It's the way I remember it.
When they kill people, they make it as brutal as possible. They do that for several reasons. They want to get that story out. That, hey, if you're going to die in a very, very dreadful way.
Daryl Gates watched the rise of the Mexican Mafia during his years as chief of the Los Angeles Police Department.
If you had to describe them in one word, what would it be?
Deadly. Deadly. Like a rattlesnake.
Why deadly?
Because they can reach out and cause your death, my death, at any time.
And they're not afraid to do it.
Oh, not afraid. Badge of honor. Absolute badge of honor. To have somebody killed.
There are only a few hundred made members of LAM, and half of them are in prison. But they're so feared that law enforcement takes extraordinary precautions whenever they move them. The LA Sheriff's Department transported some by helicopter for trial in 1995, blindfolding them to protect the security of the deputies. Down on the streets of Los Angeles, the Mexican Mafia commands the allegiance of tens of thousands of Hispanic gang members. Miami routinely enlists gang members to carry out Mexican Mafia business. LAPD officer Rich Arcenega patrols South Central Los Angeles.
They run things inside the jail, and they're running things outside the jail right now.
So they're pretty active outside of prison.
They're very active. They're probably more active outside of prison because that's where they're making the money.
LAM is in the process of trying to organize and take control of the drug business run by hundreds of Hispanic street gangs. Not by importing and distributing the drugs, but by extortion, collecting taxes from the gangs for the privilege of selling drugs in their own neighborhood.
What kind of a tax?
Just as an example, you sell $100 worth of dope, you got to give the Mexican Mafia $10. I mean, that's an example.
Like a kickback.
Just a kickback.
Why are Hispanic gang members so willing to pay taxes to and carry out the edicts of a gang that they're not members of? Think of it as insurance. Most of them know they're likely to end up in prison at some time in their lives, a prison likely to be controlled by the Mexican Mafia, and they want to make sure that they're on LAM's good side. That includes keeping your mouth shut when strangers or the police ask you questions.
For 60 minutes. We're down here trying to find out a little bit about the Mexican Mafia.
I don't know about it.
Never heard of it? LAM?
Well, I heard about it, but I don't know nothing about it.
You think we'll be able to find anybody down here and talk to us about it?
Nope.
You been to jail?
Yeah.
And you never had any contact with the Mexican Mafia?
Nope.
Or you don't want to talk about it?
I don't want to talk about it.
People will not admit that a Mexican Mafia even exists. Everybody knows it exists, but on the streets, you will get tacit denial. People will deny it left and right.
Why is that?
They're afraid for their lives. They're afraid to become victims as other people have died.
And there are plenty of reasons for them to fear for their lives. This undercover police videotape shows Mexican Mafia members, including one defendant in the federal racketeering trial, discussing a murder contract on MA member Anthony Dito Moreno. His crime? He wanted to get out of LAM, and not long after this meeting, he did. He was murdered. The hit was actually carried out by members of a local gang called Sangra, who caught up with Dito at this tiny house in El Monte, California. They not only killed Dito, they killed his sister, a friend of his sister's, and two of his sister's small children, a 5-year-old girl and a 6-month-old boy. Chris Cano and August Doherty were two of the paramedics on the scene that night.
Obviously, these people used high-caliber weapons, and they were just, randomly just shooting everybody.
And when you saw the two children, I think that's when you're thinking, ooh, this is really getting tough.
What did you find?
We found a mom, a 5-year-old, and a 6-month-old laying side by side with several wounds, both to the head, to the chest.
And the baby had been shot once in the right eye.
They shot a 6-month-old baby in the face?
Yeah.
The two triggermen, Richard Valdez and Jimmy Palma, were eventually caught, tried, and on this day last December convicted of murder, although you wouldn't know it from their reaction in these pictures. Both men were given the death penalty.
They are individuals who have no hesitancy in killing at all. They feel no sympathy for the people they kill. They don't think like you and I. They don't have the mores that you and I. They belong to a different process.
Prosecutor Michael Genelin is head of the hardcore gang division of the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office.
Don't get the idea that they are some kind of crazy fanatics. You shouldn't believe that, because they're not. They know exactly how far they can go and what's going to happen to them.
You seem to be saying that they'd be more concerned about not performing the contract, which was expected of them,
yes,
than they would be about the consequences from doing it.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. I think that that once they agree to take on a hit, or they're told to take on a hit, many times they're told to do the hit without any input in it. That's what they do. I mean, they go ahead and do it.
Even if there are witnesses, and even if the witnesses are cops. While in custody in the LA County Jail, MA member Salvador Buenrostro, who had fallen out of favor with his colleagues, was attacked and stabbed by Mexican Mafia members Topo Peters and Rene Enriquez. Probation officer Georgie O'Connor was only 4 feet away when the attack occurred, in an attorney visiting room. She was one of a room full of witnesses who saw Peters and Enriquez unhandcuff themselves and stab Buenrostro 25 times.
Peters and Enriquez didn't care that there was witnesses. They didn't care that there was 15 or more sheriffs now surrounding them. They continued to stab Buenrostro. And when they thought he was dead, and I was close enough that I thought he was dead, they stopped, and they stood up, and they dropped their weapons, and they turned themselves back over to the sheriff's custody.
How did they get knives, and how did they get keys to the handcuffs?
I don't believe that there's anything that the Mexican Mafia members need that they cannot obtain, no matter whether they're inside a jail or prison facility. They can access weapons, access narcotics, access phones, and access anything that they need to take care of their business.
What did this episode tell you about the Mexican Mafia?
They don't foresee that there are any consequences to their actions that the justice system can give them.
Because?
They're already in prison.
But there are consequences for those who testify against La Ame. In the El Monte case, 2 witnesses were killed before the trial. And since O'Connor testified about the jail stabbing incident at the federal racketeering trial, she says she's been intimidated numerous times, followed home from work, watched by strangers parked outside of her house. O'Connor lost her badge because she's too terrified to go to work, and she's been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder.
Why did you testify?
I testified because it was a morally right thing to do. And I've come forward to talk to you, Mr. Croft, because I want to speak on behalf of the witnesses that ultimately become victims. We need to establish something that encourages them and helps them to get through this so that they'll stand up for what's morally right. The bottom line is it's good against evil, and if we don't stand up against the MA, the evil wins.
The ability of the Mexican Mafia to intimidate extends far beyond the barrios and the prison system. In fact, it reached all the way into the Hollywood film community after the release of a movie called American Me.
The film, directed by and starring actor Edward James Olmos, told the story of La Ame and its murderous ways. It got little attention at the box office, but attracted a lot of attention from the Mexican Mafia.
I take it the Mexican Mafia did not like the movie.
No, they sure didn't.
Tony Casas, a retired assistant prison warden, worked with Olmos on the film. He says La Ame was extremely upset. 3 people who served as consultants on the movie were murdered, including anti-gang activist Ana Lizarraga.
So all 3 of these people had been involved with the movie?
Yes.
And all 3 of them were killed?
Yes.
Because they were involved with the movie?
Part of the reason that they were killed, I'm sure, had to do with the movie.
You believe that there's some connection?
Oh, I believe it, yes.
Casas, who attended the first screening, says he told Edward James Olmos that the rape scene could cause a problem.
You asked him why he put it in?
I asked him why he put it in.
What did he say?
He said he just wanted to, he said it was a philosophical thing, I think he said, to try and make it more scary for the youngsters. You know, here's what can happen to you, you know. you can get raped.
Do you think he had any idea that it was going to cause problems?
I don't think so. I don't think he had the slightest idea that that would cause problems.
He made a mistake.
He made a mistake.
In the aftermath of American Me, Olmos was called to testify before a federal grand jury. The original indictment in the racketeering case against Laeme stated that the gang had tried to extort property and money from Olmos and wanted to kill him following the movie. According to law enforcement sources, the extortion count was dropped from the indictment when the actor indicated he had nothing to say regarding the threats against him. He has also refused to talk to us about the case.
Is it difficult to get a witness to testify in a case involving the Mexican Mafia?
I think anytime you have a gang case, and I know Laeme is involved, they will have certainly a tremendous amount of trepidation about testifying, and perhaps rightfully so.
What do you mean, rightfully so?
Well, I mean, it's clearly possible that that gang might go after them.
And that's why Georgie O'Connor says her life will never be the same.
I wear a vest, bulletproof vest. I try not to keep a regular schedule. I never open the front door to anyone. An expert in the MA told me, don't ever assume once you've testified that there is no contract out against you. You have to assume always, in order to protect your life, that there is.
What's going on, you guys? Welcome back. Another episode of Greenlit Gang TV. Hope y'all having a blessed day. Really quick, before jumping in, though, you already know what we got to do. Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. It goes a long way for the growth of this channel. Big shout out to each and every one of you who's continued to support. As you all know, the new goal, 30,000 subscribers. Hope to get there whenever, man. That's what I've stated in the last couple of videos. We will get there when we get there. Again, thanks for all the support. Okay, so as promised, I mentioned in the last video with Cricket Jackson, we're going to be talking about his mentor, Adolfo Champ Reynoso. One of the last, I would say, of like a dying breed. This guy was solid all the way through, never dropped out, never debriefed, never was a, his character was never in question as far as gang life and all that goes, right? Guy was solid, passed away. He was in the Florence ADX in Colorado, passed away in a Pueblo, Colorado hospital in 2018, as we talked about in the intro. Guy had done like 4 decades plus straight, been locked up forever. We're going to be getting into his background, some of the guys he's tied into. Adolfo Champ Reynoso, he's a who's who. This guy was around and hung out and was deeply involved with the who's who of the Mexican Mafia. He's part of that first generation of Laeme and just, represented them well. If you are a Mexican Mafia member or a gang member, you look at him and go, that's how you do it. That's how I would want to live my gang life, I guess, have my career go. Little side note, I like to give these to you guys. I came across this in an article I was reading today. Just a little fact, right? I like to throw these in here sometimes on these videos. It doesn't directly relate to Champ, but it's interesting. It said from 95 to 03, so for like almost a decade, the Mexican Mafia closed its memberships and would not allow any new members to join their ranks. Don't know if that's because that's around the time of that big federal RICO case where basically this was the first time that there had been other cases, but this was the really first big one that pulled back the veil and kind of put the Mexican Mafia out on the forefront for others to see. Don't know that anything to do with it, but again, just thought that was interesting. Okay, shout out to my social media page, my favorite social media page, Prison Chronicles. They do an amazing job. Again, go check those guys out. He didn't post directly Adolfo Champ Reynoso, or they didn't post him, but he posted Cricket Jackson, which led me to Champ. So I just want to make sure I shout them out. And another YouTube channel. Got to give credit where credit's due. PFP is the name of the channel. I believe it stands for Police Fire Publishing. And an ex-Mexican Mafia member who's actually in some of these news stories we cover, Ramon Mundo Mendoza. I'd say he's probably number 2 on the most infamous Mexican Mafia, dropouts, right? He basically debriefed. He turned state's government witness evidence. And he does a very good job of storytelling because he was there for all of it. He has an extreme personal, knowledge about all this stuff. And I did watch his video on Adolfo Champ Reynoso. Go over, check his channel out. He does a great job. First, though, a little interesting. I'm going to start with Adolfo Champ Reynoso's obituary. I thought this was interesting how it read. I want to read it to you guys. And that's also why I chose the spelling of his name in this video. You notice I spell it Adolfo. And a lot of pages or channels and news articles, they spell it differently, but I chose to spell it like this today because this is the first time I'd seen his obituary. This is obviously a family member or somebody who knew him very well that chose to write it, and that's how they spelled it, so that's how I wanted to spell it. Adolfo Champ Reynoso, born August 21st, 1943, to Adolfo Reynoso and Dolores Moreno in Denver, Colorado. I thought that was interesting. He was born in Colorado, and because of where he was at in ADX, he actually died in Colorado. I thought that was just, very, very interesting. On November 21st, 2018, he left this world to join his belated mother, Lola Moreno, brother Gene Reynoso, and our great ancestors in the city, which his last words quoted were, "I'm in love with the city." He's talking about Los Angeles. Champ grew up in L.A., in Los Angeles, California, where he was one of 7 children. He was the oldest of his siblings, Gene, Albert, Michael, and Gary, Dolores, and Lorraine. He was a father to 3 children, John, Daniel, and Miranda, grandfather to 6. Champ was a man of principles and strong beliefs. He was a man of strength and wisdom. He was a believer that the mind should be as strong as the body and achieved this through becoming a master of meditation and yoga, but it was his passion and love for his people that drove him. He studied and learned the true history of his Mexican roots and made sure he passed it on to all that crossed his path. And it says at the end, he was a true Mexican, ! Okay, so up here, some facts about him. He was, at the time of his passing, the highest-ranking Mexican Mafia member, all right? So when he died in the federal system, he was the highest-ranking La MA member, all right? Basically been told that the cancer was spreading through his body and metastasized, and been locked up for the better part of 4 decades. He got the name Champ for his fighting in the streets. He had a very good fighting skill. Goes hand in hand. Champ, right? Referring to a boxer. Goes off to prison in the 60s and kind of gets recruited into La MA from there. Remember, he's from Big Hazard. Big Hazard 13, Boyle Heights, Ramona Gardens. Very infamous hood, very infamous gang. Just Google him, man. It's kind of one of those things, right? Just Google me. He spent time, a lot of his early years in San Quentin and Folsom prisons. And like a lot of gang members, and sometimes this doesn't get talked about enough, the guys that know, well, I've heard this talked about when I hear Boxer Enriquez talk, or I hear Mundo talk, or other gang members, the drug addiction side of it, right? A lot of these gang members, and I've said this in other videos, were heroin addicts. And Champ was no different. He was, they said, a basically raging heroin addict. He had a serious problem. While in Soledad prison, this is interesting, okay? Another little side story to him. So remember, he's got this heroin addiction, but he's climbing the ranks too. He's doing what he's got to do. He's moving up. He's getting close with the right people. And while in Soledad prison, there was a guy, Mexican Mafia member, but he was kind of becoming on the outs, a guy by the name of Robert Dale Smith. They called him Pincushion because of the amount of times he'd been stabbed. He apparently popped off to Champ Reynoso, but Champ wasn't within striking distance, couldn't get to him. Pincushion was a known snitch and was alone most of the time, including exercise. However, they let him, Robert Dale Smith, better known as Pincushion, able to work out with an inmate who they deemed as non-violent. Why they did that, not sure, especially when you have these very powerful gang members. But Champ Reynoso was able to get to this inmate who was going to work out with Pincushion, do me a favor, and got that inmate to stab Robert Dale Smith multiple times. And it said, as Robert Pincushion screamed, Champ Reynoso supposedly started singing a song to try to kind of muffle the screams, distract the guards. But luckily the guards were able to realize what was going on and they stopped the attack. And Robert Dale Smith, a.k.a. Pincushion, was able to survive. Now, Champ was the second individual from Big Hazard besides Robert Crow Juarez to be made from Big Hazard. He's a first-generation Mexican Mafia member. So a lot of these first-generation guys, they parole in the 70s. Champ is no different. He gets out in the early 70s, all right? They're all enjoying their first taste of freedom. But what did we just say? He's got that heroin addiction, man. So money-making wasn't really, when you're an addict, right, and as a former addict, your addiction is on the forefront. There is, especially with opiates. And as a former heroin, as a former opiate addict, okay, I understand this fully. Nothing comes before the drug. The drug comes before everything. And these guys, they're dealing it. They're robbing drug dealers. It said that they were out raising hell. It said that Champ and other Mexican Mafia members who were out on the street, other gang members, because remember, these guys are like royalty when it comes to gang life. Sometimes I get comments that are like, man, you're calling them royalty. No, what I'm saying is in the streets, And in the gang world, they are. These are made Mexican Mafia members. They hit the street. They hit the ground running. They're calling the shots. Unlimited access to dope. They got all quantities they want, everything they could ever need. It's provided for them. They're calling the shots. It said that Champ was running dope, robbing drug dealers, doing bank robberies. He's doing all of it, okay? But it said his addiction had really taken over. So his ability to be an earner or to be able to make money wasn't always the best. And that was the case for a lot of guys. Joe Morgan had a heroin addiction. A lot of these guys had a heroin addiction, okay? And speaking of Joe Morgan, and this was according to Mundo, where he said, Joe Morgan, right? They call him the Godfather of La Ame. Champ Reynoso was considered, basically Joe Morgan considered him like a son. They said there were two people, this is according to Mundo, that Joe Morgan considered like his son, or his sons. One was Champ Reynoso, and the other was Mundo. Mundo Mendoza was the second. And Mundo says this in the video. He says, Champ stayed the course, stayed the path of the mob, and I basically betrayed my father, right? And Joe Morgan, who he was very close with at the time. He became an informant. So Champ's running and gunning. He finally gets locked up because he has an encounter with a mob boss from Los Angeles, a guy by the name of Jimmy the Weasel Fatiano from Cleveland and L.A. Jimmy had approached Champ Reynoso to kill some fellow mob associates that he thought were going to kill him first. I put his picture up there. He even gave Champ Reynoso money. Champ, not really fully believing everything, went to verify the story, to make sure it was a sanctioned hit. Jimmy gets worried about Champ. Champ gets worried about Jimmy. Well, Champ says, we're going to kill Jimmy. Champ Reynoso says, we're going to kill Jimmy. He's giving me wrong information. He's no good. We're actually going to kill him. Jimmy, also being a criminal. Both these guys didn't trust each other is how basically that story goes, is what I take from that story. Neither one of these guys trusted each other. Well, Jimmy, feeling like, yeah, you know what, I think I might end up dead. He basically disappears and becomes a full-blown government witness. Testifies against his own people in a 1980 mob trial, in a federal mob trial. And he talks about Champ Reynoso as a Mexican Mafia member. Yeah, I paid him. He was going to kill these three guys that were going to kill me. And from there, everything goes to hell. Champ, at this time, Champ Reynoso goes on this massive bank robbery spree with an Aryan Brotherhood member by the name of Puppet. I swear you can't make this up, man. This is like a movie, okay? They get arrested, okay? But they're out on bond, okay? Puppet gets convicted. All right. Champ Reynoso, seeing this, his co-defendant get convicted with the heroin addiction, mind you, takes off with his then girlfriend or wife, I forget her name's Linda. They book it back to where he's from. They go to Denver. And they're basically holed up in hotels, and all they're doing is shooting dope. And this is kind of where the story takes a darker turn. It said that he was very cruel and abusive to her. Said he would make her beg for her drugs every morning. Basically, you want to get well, prove it, right? Just sick, twisted, demented shit. That's stuff they don't talk about with a lot of these gang members, is how, sociopathic, narcissistic, and just kind of sometimes plain evil, right? To treat supposedly your love of your life like that. Well, she ends up basically turning him in. He's a fugitive. She calls it in, says, yep, we're here. They show up and arrest him. This is like in the 70s. He would never see the light of day again after he got arrested in Denver, Colorado. November 1978, him and third Mexican Mafia members attack another Mexican Mafia member by the name of Thomas Trejo. They kill him, stab 47 times. And it was heard that Champ had joked Thomas, quote, would be home for Christmas. And it was the first recorded Mexican Mafia prison murder in the feds. And then another article about his passing, okay? I'm going to read this to kind of wrap this up. Word was recently passed to me that another of the pioneers of the country's most dangerous prison gangs, the Mexican Mafia, has died. Adolfo Champ Reynoso passed at a Colorado hospital near the federal maximum security lockup where he'd spent his last many years. He was 75. Reynoso was part of LA crime lore. He was a member of Big Hazard, an East LA street gang. Later, he was a made member of La M.A. He was one of the 22 M.A. members indicted in the first federal RICO case against the gang, coming in 1995 and hinging on the testimony of Ernie Chuco Castro. Up to that point, one of the most influential members of the organization. The trial pulled back the veil on the Mafia in several ways, one of which was to reveal its scheme for using street gang members to tax drug dealers in the barrios of Southern California. The revenue for which was funneled to the Mafia members and their associates. At his passing, he was deemed the highest-ranking active Mexican Mafia members. The last few years have seen the passing of several M.A. figures from those years, those who formed or spread the M.A. Peter Sana Ojeda, Frankie B. Buena, Ruben Rodriguez, Black Dan Barella, Joe Morgan, and Benjamin Topo Peters died years ago. Many others have dropped out of the gang while in prison, an exodus that began with Castro, who went into federal witness protection, and before him, Ramon Mundo Mendoza. And you got to remember Boxer Enriquez. And he's got it's crazy, man. I see Boxer. He's got a YouTube channel. He's doing really good for himself. He has really good information. You go check his channels out, too. Most of the older MMA members, like Reynoso, were heroin addicts on the street, reflecting the fact that their criminal careers began in the late 60s, early 70s, a time when heroin crept into the Mexican-American neighborhoods of Southern California with a vengeance. And I think that's something, that's why I wanted to end it on that doesn't get talked about enough, is just the addiction, okay? Addiction, drugs, that breeds criminal activity. I am a heroin addict. I am a junkie. That's what I was for 10 years. Guess what? I did illegal shit. I need to get well. I'm going to do whatever it takes. Okay? Not saying that these guys weren't going to become gang members, going to become high-profile guys, but at the end of the day, these guys are also full-blown addicts who they're putting a lot of this crap that they're dealing and all that, they're putting a lot of it in their arms as well. And I just don't think that gets talked about enough. I just don't. I don't believe that if a lot of these gang members, even these Mexican Mafia guys, are like mythic, we and I say we because my channel is based around high-profile crime figures, right? High-profile gang members. I believe if you took drugs out of the equation, you would have a much smaller problem of individuals doing these kinds of crimes. Because not saying any of these guys are scared to commit crimes or any of these guys are scared to do X, Y, and Z. But when you have something as strong as an opiate or heroin or anything, it makes it a lot easier to do crazy shit or to do bad shit or to maybe stab someone or kill someone, right? If you're numb, it makes things easier. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Hope you guys have a blessed night. Peace.